No crooked police, no justice, no peace.
Even though they have a gun and a badge, they're not bad people. They're all there to help us.
One bad cop makes us all look bad.
Shot fired again. Shot fired again at us. I'm shot. I'm hit.
The police need support too. They are people too. They're human beings.
Good evening, I'm Chris Bury. The infamous video showing a Chicago police officer shooting and killing Laquan McDonald touched off a tidal wave of protests and political upheaval in this city. It led to the ouster of Police Superintendent Gary McCarthy and the election defeat of Cook County State's Attorney Anita Alvarez. Tonight, In the Loop kicks off a four-part series, Chicago on the Brink, a look at the relationship between the community and law enforcement. We will hear from police, community activists, pastors, and journalists. Tonight's program features a candid conversation among four retired police officers. They discuss the pressures of policing violent neighborhoods and how to repair relations in communities that no longer trust the police.
Traffic stops, domestic disturbances, alarm calls, those are the big ones where police officers get hurt.
You're always trying to be prepared for something unexpected.
At nighttime, people, to me, were meaner. They were solemn. They were always trying to get out of something. It was a whole different demeanor.
There's so much tension now. As an officer, you can't approach it the same way.
Mm-hmm. Well, now you make a stop and you literally got a cell phone in your face. That was unheard of a couple years ago.
Right. Used to be the video cameras would come out if you stopped somebody on the block that was known.
Well, somebody outside the vehicle might throw a video camera on, but now you stop a vehicle and you got these people in the car throwing a phone on you right away.
But you know what? I used to tell my guys, if you're not doing police work as if a camera was watching you the whole time, you're wrong. That's the way you have to approach police work now. Everything that you do, you should expect to see it on tape.
Absolutely.
And for everybody to see. You know, I mean, you got to be 100% right. Pretend like you're on camera all the time. The officers, when they jump out of the car, shouldn't have to worry about turning on a body camera. If they can't get the technology that as soon as the officer puts on the blue lights or whatever, that it automatically goes on, I mean, that's the last thing he should be worried about. When he gets out of that car, he should be protecting himself, making sure that he isn't, you know, in a position where he's going to get hurt. It should just be automatic. If you want to see what we do out there, you better make it a little bit idiot-proof.
Now, how does that affect you if a person brought out a phone, or even if they were a little chippy, you know, when you initially, engage with them?
I look at it as an opportunity. If this guy has his phone out, he's doing it for a reason. Or if his friends have a phone out, they're doing it for a reason. They're going to try and bait you and try and get you to go, and argue with them. Be professional. The bottom line is, if you're going to write them a ticket, you're going to write them a ticket. If you're going to arrest them, you're going to arrest them. If you have probable cause to do it, you do it. Don't worry about the camera.
Right.
A lot of it is intimidation, though.
Yeah, and I guess I look at it maybe a little different, and I say that because I've heard enough of complaints from citizens. I worked in internal affairs to know why they would feel they needed to do it. Where it goes south is that sometimes now this video recording of our contact becomes the issue and not the violation we stopped them for to start with.
Right.
Exactly.
Right.
But it becomes an issue because a lot of officers take shortcuts. You know, a lot of times if you recall, I remember when you first come out the academy, when you would either field training officer or a seasoned officer, okay, this is how they told you how it's done in the academy, but this is how it's done on the street. So you have two kinds of ways of policing, and a lot of times people pick up that street way of policing and forget the proper way, even at times that puts their lives in jeopardy. Not to say that they're bad officers, it just becomes more expedient, is more convenient, and you get comfortable, and then sometimes you develop this attitude, this hierarchy. You know, I'm the authority, you do what I say do.
But you are the authority.
You're the authority. Authority and being right is not always the same thing.
There are laws in the books. And
yeah, that's why they teach us that stuff.
Yeah, and if you...
You just can't do it willy-nilly.
If you break the law or commit a traffic infraction and the officer stops you, you don't have a right to argue with them. There are avenues if you think you've been wrong through police review, IPRA, whatever it is now, civil, avenues. So,
and we know where that gets most people. But the point that I'm making is not an argument. The officer perceives himself, because of what you invested in and taking the oath and the authority, that automatically, when I stop you, the citizen is supposed to comply.
Well, yeah, you should.
Automatically. The citizen does not feel that way.
Well,
so
no,
what
I'm
saying is, what I'm saying is, you have to know that the citizen doesn't feel that way. So you can't keep pushing your authority if you want less confrontation. And I think this is where the citizen feels disrespected.
Yeah, right before I retired, we implemented the dashboard cameras. One of the things that I noted, and I think it has a lot to do with, even now with officers and the public, the element of trust. The officer starts his day out knowing that he's not trusted. The citizen knows that he can't trust the officer. That's a huge part of your relationship with an individual when you go on a call. You get routine, you become somewhat mechanical in your approach to talking with people.
Sure.
And I think that is a negative. And I think that's one of I think in terms of cameras, I think they're a good idea. I'm not saying not a good idea, but I think the impact that they have on the officer's disposition, and to an extent, public's trust, that it's a negative. And the public feels as though...
But you can't say all civilians distrust the police, because that's not true.
That's a blanket statement.
No, I'm not saying. I'm saying the guy that is being handcuffed may not trust you. But what I'm saying is the people who are standing by, maybe the person that called, that person should trust that what you're doing is right. What I'm saying is the problem is that that's eroding. That, now, the guy that made the phone call, the guy that, we're providing a service for, that person saying, hey, you have to have a body camera and a dash camera in order for me to trust you now. And
that's a reality.
Yeah, and that's that. I think that is a big part of some of the bad relationships, is that trust and respect.
But it evolved to that point.
Right.
And sometimes we constantly react to now as opposed to how to resolve it. If we don't like them, we don't think a body camera is a good thing, and we don't think the dash camera is a good thing, how do we get to a point where we don't need them? And I think the police could influence that.
Oh, yes.
That's never going to happen.
The police department has always been reactive.
Right. And that's not a good
instead
thing.
of proactive.
I agree with you. I agree with you. And the reactionary modus operandi of the police have gotten us where we are today. So is that a good thing?
The problem is police work is not an exact science. You can take the officer, you can teach him all the stuff he needs in the academy. If you don't train him enough, that's going to be a problem. But the bottom line is when you get him out there, he's making a decision that people get to reflect on and critique in court, in civil litigation, on the media at night on the news. If you were a real police officer, you know how tough this job is, and you know how quick you have to make a determination. And sometimes it's the wrong determination. And it's not a matter of you did it because you don't like black people or you don't like Hispanic people. It's because that's your job and you had to make a determination. And you know that. If you've ever been a police officer, you know that these things come fast and furious and you do the best job you can. And everybody else can critique you later on down the road, but it doesn't make the job any easier.
What other profession, when you think about it, is scrutinized like the police?
Let's face it, in Chicago, a lot of the policing is politically driven.
Well, of course
it has nothing to do with best practices to make the community safe.
Where are most of your police resources sent to?
Right.
High crime areas.
If we put too many coppers in the troubled areas where there's a lot of shootings, we're a police invasion force. If we don't have enough, we're not providing enough security, we're not providing enough police services for the community.
Is that a new phenomenon, or?
No, not at all.
Oh, okay.
But again, it's politically driven. If you let the professionals in the police department handle it, you might get a little bit better results.
But you're also, like you were saying about the complaints, you're going to have more complaints in certain communities because you are going to have more police in those communities. You're going to have more interaction with the police in those communities. And you got to, I mean, admit, most of the interactions with police, it's never really positive. You're getting stopped for traffic ticket or whatever. That's not a positive thing.
Or you had your house broken into and now you're making a police report, you know, and you don't think that the cop's doing enough for you to get your stuff back or to solve the crime. We're not firemen. We don't get cats out of trees. We're not, you know, the
everybody
warm,
loves the firemen.
people.
Nobody loves the police.
Yeah, and I want to say policing is very complex from day to day. How are we interacting with the people that we come into contact with? Again, from my background in internal affairs, when I listened to most of the complaints, I found that a great majority of the complaints would have gone away if the officer didn't engage or disengage in a manner that he or she did. And I think part of it is that tension that exists, especially today. It's probably the most difficult time to police because not only do you have the tensions that previously existed, we have not focused on building better relationships. We've advocated the cameras are going to solve the problem.
No. Camera makes it worse.
Right.
And unfortunately, if I may, a lot of the proactive police work is going to drop off.
Oh, it already
because
has.
of the cameras.
I guarantee you it already has.
Go ahead.
What kind of relationship are we building, not just necessarily in the community, sometimes within our departments? You have departments where, you know, the guy that every time he shows up on a call, he or she, that their disposition is so negative that what could have been a simple, call now becomes a disaster.
Right.
And I always just tell guys that work for me, I said, if you don't know who that guy is, you're that guy or that woman. You're the person that agitates things to the extent that they get out of control. There are some areas that you have to go in and be very forceful. And I would say that the best way to deal with the problems are very forceful. But at the same time, we have to be able to differentiate those people who we need to be forceful with to that common citizen who we need to be supportive of.
And that takes skill, and that takes empathy, and that takes a lot of humanity because a lot of officers, they do it the same across the board. I think most of the officers, as everybody say, are good people, but being a police officer requires certain skills. What quality of human beings are we putting on the department? Everybody can't be the police. Everybody can't be a teacher.
That's right.
Everybody can't be a doctor. So this is what we have to weed out.
I can't stress enough lack of training on the Chicago Police Department. And when there are lawsuits, that's one of the biggest factors is lack of training, and that's why you get the big payouts. Officers do the best job they can, but they should be trained a little bit better.
You have people who are just merely acting on whatever their personal feeling is, how they should respond, or instinct. Those are the things that I found in that are dominating those first actions that the officer takes.
I've personally been involved in several shootings throughout my career. And you do get into that tunnel vision. And I think a lot of it, like you said, is survival instinct. I think training comes into play maybe a little bit, but honestly, you just don't have time to really think about anything. There's no taking a deep breath sometimes. I mean, sometimes it just happens like that. It happens so fast, and you react the best way you can.
But we do have some things that give us a little bit of an edge. I have to disagree with you, only because I was a firearms instructor.
Well, no, training definitely helps.
I mean, we teach the guys, you know, you tend to fall back on under moments of stress.
Yes, you do.
As long as you teach it to them the right way.
Properly.
And Pat, to get back to what you were saying before, you make some good points about, you know, one size does not fit all. But whose fault is that? I mean, should maybe the bosses allow their first line supervisors to make those assessments and say, hey, you know what? You don't have the temperament for working here right now. Okay, maybe you need to take a step back. Maybe you need to go back to the academy. There should be some retraining. There should be some other options besides discipline. You know, as a sergeant, if I see some guy that just has no flexibility with the community, all I can do is counsel him. If he gets completely out of hand, maybe, you know, write him up. It's all discipline, but I'm not teaching him anything.
Right.
I can tell him, hey, you know, you're interacting with the community in a negative fashion. You know, this is what you need to do. If he doesn't get it, he needs to go back and sit down out of that element and relearn what he's doing wrong and correct it. So,
you said as a sergeant you can't teach him anything. Some people are deficient. I think the recruitment, the testing, all of that needs to be revamped. And that's skewed. There are a lot of things that need to be corrected that allow for these kinds of individuals to get on this job. And it's not a few bad apples. It's systemic. This is all over the place, not just Chicago. So there's something going on in policing in America that we need to look at.
The police department is probably one of the most political departments in the city, and it's run from the top down. They're the ones that are pulling the strings on the department. I don't care who you put in there as a superintendent. It doesn't matter.
Unless he has the ability to run a department.
But you know he doesn't have full authority to do it.
Right, and that's the problem. Again, we don't want to come back to just Chicago, but the politics that are involved in running a police department need to be taken completely out.
That'll never happen.
And that'll never happen.
And that should happen. That'll
never happen.
Absolutely.
That should be the first thing. The mayor, the city manager should not be involved in decision making within the police department. We're not trying to do what's best. It may be for the community, the officer, but we're just trying to do something to make it go away. And that's not the right answer.
Being a sergeant in the detective unit, you can testify to this. After a police shooting, there is probably no more stringent of an investigation.
Exactly. And,
you know, it's out there in the public that, well, the police are covering this up and the police are covering that up. The detectives are not covering up anything. Nobody wants to go, nobody's going to lie or hide something in a high-profile situation like that where they can be fired and go to jail. It's, you know, that myth, I think, it's out there. And I think
way overplayed.
It is, and I think a lot has to do with the media too, the way the media covers a lot of these police shootings. You'll see it constantly on the news, the videos of the officers in these shootings. It's nonstop.
Right. The video is obviously helpful.
Snippets of the video.
Right. And it is helpful, but it's not the whole picture.
Of course not.
What the camera sees might not be what the officer's focused on. The camera's sitting here. You don't know where my head is. You don't know what I'm perceiving, what I'm taking from the situation. Radio traffic, when you're going to the call, sometimes it's flawed. Sometimes it's erroneous. It's not anybody's fault. Some people call in and they think they're being helpful and they're giving you information. You have all of this stuff going by you while you're on your way to the call. You might be reacting to what's going on with this bank of information, and some of it may be flawed. Okay? You don't necessarily know what is true and what isn't. You're trying to make your best decision on what you know.
After it's done, what are we seeing? The community's not getting the information they need that would help them to better understand. You start talking about radio traffic, all those things that are going in that come into play in these situations. But that's not the kind of information that goes out that helps the public to understand sometimes how difficult the job is. As officers, we have to be upfront and honest when something's not right to say it's not right.
You can give the information to the public, and there's still, certain factions are still going to churn up what they want and keep the false statement out there as if it were fact.
Do you think the fact that the people who live in that community have a feeling that they're not treated fairly by the police, do you think that impacts whether or not they trust what was done by the police?
Over the years, I was involved in several different investigations, operations in neighborhoods, gangs, narcotics, and whatnot. You know, I can remember doing these gang sweeps and narcotic sweeps on certain blocks and in certain neighborhoods. There were times that after we were leaving, I got hugs, high fives from the people living there. Thank you, thank you, thank you very much. But then you're also going to get the family members of the people you locked up that aren't going to be happy. They never show the ones that are hugging the police or thanking the police or high-fiving the police.
There are people who appreciate what we do. The problem that we have is that we don't highlight or we don't have a relationship with those people. We have to do a better job at making sure that we highlighting those things that we're doing.
But you're never going to make everybody happy.
You're not.
It's not possible.
But I do say that person that came up and hugged you, that's the person we have to make sure we maintain a relationship with that person. Eventually, they'll come out and they'll start saying.
I used to give my phone numbers out all the time.
Yeah, the bad guys down the street, around the corner.
Right. But Henry, you know, everybody talks about, well, the police department needs to change. The police department needs to grow. And you know what? It does to an extent. But nobody's getting to the underlying problem with a lot of these communities that are having these huge increases in crime. A lot of it is cultural. This gang thug mentality that is worshipped in a lot of these communities.
I wouldn't say it was cultural.
It's a subculture.
It's a subculture.
Yeah, because I know that there are people who live in those communities that feel in prison. Kids that can't get out, and so that's not their culture. They just happen to live there, and so I wouldn't blame it on the culture of that community. I know that there are individuals, and you could probably pinpoint them. If you direct your resources at eliminating that individual from that community, you wouldn't have the problems. And the other thing that has a big impact on it is socioeconomic conditions.
Of course.
Police departments,
the disparity.
Right.
You remove the schools, you remove the stores, you remove everything, you have nothing.
Right.
You create things to survive. The gang thug culture is very prominent because it generates revenue. It's almost the same as child soldiers in third world countries. You do not have the resource. You would be shocked at what is missing in Inglewood in the United States of America, or even of Ferguson, or even a lot of these other cities around the country, in the most prosperous country in the world. There is an age group, a generation, that seems to be in the center of all this as the victim and the offenders. Let's talk about this. Most old people aren't getting shot. People my age, 65 and whatever, we're not getting shot by the police.
Right. People need to realize that with rights come responsibilities, okay? Common sense, okay? Respect for the law, respect for their neighbors, okay?
Respect for yourself.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you.
But here's the thing. Now, is that everybody or is it just the community?
Everybody.
Is that the police as well?
Absolutely.
Okay. And because I think that the community struggles with is that they don't feel that the police are going to have the same expectations of themselves that they have of the community. We need resources to go to the community so they can do their part. They know who the bad guys are. They know the services that are needed. They know what needs to be done. We can develop a relationship with them where we're working together, but we just need you to work with us.
If I came down from another planet and got dropped in the middle of Chicago and only had what I see in the media, I would think that the police department is an occupation force, they're racist, and all they're doing is killing black kids for no apparent reason. That's the slant. And the people that are speaking out are the people that have their own agenda, and they're just trying to use whatever methods, you know. I'm sorry, and I know this has been said before, but this Black Lives Matter, where are they when this 10-year-old kid was shot? Where are they for all of these shootings? Really, the small percentage of interactions where the police officer shoots an offender, that's what they're worried about. They're not worried about these poor kids that are getting slaughtered on the street. There's nobody marching up and down. I'll tell you what, if they go out there, I'll join them, and I'll walk up and down the block with them to protest the shootings that are happening to poor people that are just sitting on their porch.
But are we held to a higher standard?
Of course you are.
Sure you are.
Okay, and I said this, I was listening to the same individual speak, and I hear a guy one day say something about he didn't like Black Lives Matter, they shouldn't do it, we should never, you know, focus on one group. Maybe a month later, I heard the same guy says, Blue Lives Matter. I just heard you say a month ago that we shouldn't do that, it's divisive. But here you are saying Blue Lives Matter. Well, to me, both of them do.
How about all lives matter?
Yeah,
Leave it at that.
I'm just saying, yeah, to me, I mean, yeah, they do. But what I'm saying is that I think that initially it's a thought process. We're trying to stimulate a thought process. To take a negative position against any one of the groups is the wrong thing to do. And I thought, let's be consistent. Everybody matters. But we have to approach it that way.
The community is not happy with us. A large segment of the protesting community is being so vocal that everyone else doesn't really get to hear the side of the police department. The politicians are certainly feathering their own bed, and they're going to land on whatever side keeps them in office. So if it means throwing the police to the wolves, then so be it. I think that the average police officer that gets on this job with the mindset that, it's a great job, it's good pay, but I think most coppers want to do the right thing. They want to serve the community. Is it hard for them to do right now? Absolutely. Are they going to take a step back and be less proactive? Are they going to be a little more reticent to challenge the bad guy because his actions are going to be put under a microscope? Absolutely. Are the shootings going to go up? Unfortunately,
you're seeing it now.
You're seeing it now. There's more. There were 800 more shootings now than there were last year at this time.
This was a bad couple of weeks.
And you know, what people perceive that the police don't care, it's not true. The problem is that they're behind the proverbial 8-ball, that if they do aggressive police work, they're going to get jammed up. And if they don't do anything, they don't care. So, you know, I mean, there's always going to be somebody that's unhappy with our level of service. The Chicago Police Department, in my humble opinion, is doing the best job that they can right now under the circumstances that they find themselves.
A recent Chicago Tribune analysis found that between 2010 and 2015, 94% of those shot during foot chases were black. Next week, a conversation with members of the community, including those fighting to bring about change. Join us as we continue our special 4-part series on In the Loop. And to hear more from tonight's discussion, log on to wycc.org and link on In the Loop. Until next week, I'm Chris Bury. Good night.